Hello, everyone. I am Sophia Melonē, the Debt Demolisher, here to bring you the tools, tips, and tricks to help you manage your financial baggage the right way. It is an honor and privilege to be before you all for yet another live stream night, as I promised that I will be sharing and having our conversations continued around student loan debt, as well as any other questions or comments that you may have related to all of the things that we've been discussing thus far. One of the things that I do want to start this conversation is by talking about some of the things that you can do to approach your debt situation. I know that there has been many conversations and many comments that I've been seeing from folks saying how disappointed that they will be if they are not able to receive this relief, or even if those who have applied for public service loan forgiveness and may have received some denial letters or may have received some information saying that they were not approved for the public service loan forgiveness. Remember, these two are two different things. I just really wanted to be able to share a little bit of insight and encouragement to those on how you could approach your situation, even if you're not able to get this relief. According to the Department of Education, we know that the one-time debt relief is still under the block because of the court order that was issued. But they are still in the process of going through each of the applications that have been submitted prior to the block going into effect. So if you submitted a form, meaning the short application for the one-time debt relief, more than likely you will be receiving communications, or they will be letting you know if you have been approved or not approved for it, because the approval is based on you meeting the criteria that they have outlined based on either your 2020 or your 2021 income tax returns. So based on your filing status and what your adjusted gross income is, that will determine whether or not if you will qualify for the relief, and of course if you have federal loans. So if you received a notice saying that you were approved, good thing, that's good news. But the only thing that has to happen now is for this restriction to be lifted. Once that restriction is lifted, then they'll be able to issue out whatever your relief amount that you were approved for to be applied to your student loans. For those who have applied for public service loan forgiveness, and this is where you have the requirement to have at least 120 qualified payments, there could be some instances where some of your payments may not be counting. And it could be that they're still in the process of trying to update everything and complete their accounts based on the IDR adjustments that are happening, and also based on the limited time waiver that expired on October 31st. They still have to get all of those counts in. But people do need to understand that they have to make sure that they are under the right loan plan, meaning they have a direct loan or they have a direct consolidation loan, or if they had one of those loans that could be consolidated into a direct loan where your accounts will transfer over and you won't essentially be starting from scratch. So you should be able to see updates if your application has already been kind of processed, or if your account has already been kind of processed. You'll be able to see where you are in terms of your accounts. For the public service loan forgiveness portion of the house, counts will be updated on a periodic basis. So you may see one count today, but that count could change within the next week. It could go up within the next 2 weeks. It just depends on how they are moving through the counts and the applications based on what you submitted thus far. But one thing that you can do to help with your approach, I know that student loans is a huge issue. Many of you have 6-figure student loan debt. Some of you have 5-figure student loan debt. Some of you only have 4-figure student loan debt, which is powerful. And some of you may even have less than that. But I do want to share that there is a way out. So I don't think I've shared many or much of my story per se in terms of how I was able to come out of the debt that I was in, how I was able to pay off my student loans. I had over $111,000 of student loan debt, and I was able to pay off all of my student loans by May of 2017. So by May of 2017, I paid off all of my student loans just by following a simple approach. It may seem simple, but believe it or not, many people aren't able to uphold the steps that I took. But being a person who was managing 2 households, being a person who was very bad with how I managed my money, I spent it as soon as I got it. I never saved anything. I was learned and taught to survive. And so because of the environment that I grew up in, and because I just didn't know any better, the monies that I earned, I used it to either spend on myself or use it to spend on others in order to fill those inner voids and insecurities that I had. And it wasn't until I completed an exercise similar to this time frame, because we're at the ending of the year now, where I wanted to literally compare how much money I made in the year in comparison to my bank account. And seeing the difference between how much I grossed when I looked at my last pay stub for the year in comparison to what my cumulative bank balance was, I was disgusted with myself. I said, how in the world was I able to earn this amount of money, but I don't even have $10 in my account? Like, where is all of my money going? Like, what is seriously happening here? And that small exercise helped me come to the realization that there's something really wrong with my behavior. So I had to take accountability and accept the fact that it was something wrong with what I was doing. And so when I saw that huge discrepancy between the two numbers, I said to myself, let me find out where all my money went. If my pay stub says that I grossed this much in income, where is it? Where is it? Where did it go? And I had to begin to backtrack and look at my account details. I started to look through my bank history because I was already in my bank balance anyway. So I just went back, and I was just saying where my money was going every month. And literally it was going to debt payments. It was going to car payments. It was going to credit cards. It was going to mortgages. It was going to student loans. It was going to personal loan. It was going to every kind of debt you could imagine, with the exception of payday loans. That was the only thing that I did not get myself involved in, just because of how costly it is. So between all of the different debts that I had, I was like, okay, if I'm making all of these monthly payments, then how much do I owe right now? How much do I owe right now? So after taking the step to identify where my money was going and seeing that it was all going to debt payments, I went and I looked at every single debt account that I had. So I logged into my student loans. I logged into all of my credit card accounts. I logged into my personal loan accounts. I logged into my mortgage accounts. I logged into everything. And I literally made a list to identify what my balance was as of today, or as of that point in time when I was doing the checking. And when I tallied up the number to see how much I owed, it was over $365,000. And I was flabbergasted. I could not believe that before the age of 30, I was in over $365,000 of debt, which comprised of $40,000 in credit card debt. At that point, it was $80,000 in student loan debt. I had a car loan that probably had about $23,000 that was left. I had mortgages because I said before that I was a caregiver to my mom. I became responsible for her mortgage at a very early age, before I even really had enough to afford it based on the job that I was doing at that time. So her mortgage, and then my own mortgage, and then I had personal loans, $23,000, $24,000, $25,000 personal loans. So all of those things added up, it was over $365,000. And when I saw that number, my heart dropped and my stomach literally felt upset. I said that there's no way that I'm going to be able to pay that off. So many of you may have or be in a situation where you may feel the same way. You have an astronomical amount of student loan debt. Your student loan debt could very well be $150,000. Your student loan debt could very well be $200-something thousand. Let's be real, because I do know some folks who have student loan debt that are $200,000 plus. Come on. $200,000 plus. So I'm not saying that it's not out there, because it is a very real situation for a lot of people. And if you think about how much you pay on a $200,000 loan, if you have a mortgage and it's stretched out over 30 years, can you only imagine what someone is paying on a $200,000 cumulative student loan balance that may be split up amongst multiple different disbursements with multiple different disbursement dates that have multiple different lengths in terms of when you have to repay it by. So that amount due in and of itself can be $2,000 and $3,000 and maybe even $4,000 cumulative. That's a lot of money that many people may not be able to afford. So if you look at your cumulative debt and it may seem overwhelming, like you're not going to be able to get through, or you're not going to be able to get out of whatever hole that you're in, it's essential that you make a decision at that point in time. So what was pivotal for me when I looked at my number and I saw that I was in over $365,000 of debt, I had to make a choice after I picked my stomach up off the floor, after I picked my jaw up off the floor. I had to make a choice to say, either I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing and I'm going to let this number rise, or I'm going to make a decision to not allow this number to increase. And when I say this number, I'm referring to the amount of debt that I saw that I was in at the time when I added up my current balances as of that date, which was December 31st, 2015. So looking at the cumulative amounts of my debts and seeing that I wanted to make the decision to no longer increase that number, I then had to ask myself a very general but yet challenging question, which was, how can I get myself out of this? So as I'm sharing my story, and I'm not sharing my story just to share my story, I'm sharing my story so that you can put yourself in my story, so that way you can begin to devise the plan for yourself. So by me asking myself the question, how can I get myself out of this? Apparently, I was not taught how to make financial decisions in a way that I would deem to benefit me in the long haul, because growing up in my household, it was about surviving. It was about, if I could just make the minimum payment, I'm fine. If I could just meet this minimum monthly payment, I'm okay with that. Because when the home that I grew up in, debt was normal. Debt was how we lived. Debt was how we were able to eat. Debt was what was leveraged in order to help us advance. My entire way through school, I was able to get some grants. I was able to get work study, but I definitely had majority loans. I had loans that I had to take out for undergraduate and graduate school. And my mom was not in a position to take out a Parent Plus loan for me. So she made it very clear that I was going to school, but she made it very clear that if I was going to go to school, I had to take out the loans in my own name. I learned debt from a very early age. From the time I was 18, it was a mortgage in my name. I had a credit card in my name at 18. I had a mortgage in my name at 18. And then when I went to college, I had student loans in my name by the time I was 18. So for me, it was the lifestyle. It was how we survived. I thought it was the only way out. And it took me years to realize. That that's not the only way that you have to go. That's not the only way that that's not the only option for you. So realizing and recognizing that I needed to get myself out of this hole that I put myself in. Can we just be honest and can we just be transparent? Because for me, I was the one who signed the promissory notes. I was the one who signed my name on a dotted line for the car. I was the one who opened up the credit cards, even though my mom told me to. I was the one who opened up the credit cards. I was the one that had to sign for the loans because I felt like I didn't have a choice. And in my mind, I said, if I could just meet the minimum payments, I'm good. If if I could just meet the minimum payments, it's A-okay for this young lady. Not recognizing and realizing how much of my resources and the hard income that I was earning that I was giving away to the banks. Because I was literally giving them my entire paycheck. I was giving them everything that I earned because of the cost of doing business with them, because they lent me money that I didn't have. They lent me access to credit that I didn't have. So learning early on that credit was necessary, I learned it early on in an unhealthy way. So because of the challenges that I experienced, the lack that I experienced in my household, having to take care of my mom so early on, the challenges that she experienced with her conditions, and just having to work early. I started working at the age of 14. And I've been working ever since. Not realizing that I've, at this point, already been a millionaire 10 times over just based on my work history. I've earned over $1 million already just based on my job alone, not even counting other things and other avenues and ways that I'm able to generate income. But just from one type of source, income source, from the time of my lifespan, well over $1 million that I've been able to earn. So even you can think of your own situation as well and look at the lifespan that you've had and recognize and realize that more than likely you've earned $1 million already at one point in time in your life. So recognizing once again that I had to take ownership and I had to take responsibility for the decisions that I made that I felt was necessary for me at the time, I had to choose that I was going to do something differently. So my, I guess, epiphany was that no more debt for me. And I had to look for information that I was not exposed to. I had to look and find stories or find avenues or platforms that shared how to get out of 6 figures of debt, how to get out of $165,000 of debt, how to. And there are several, especially now, there's several resources, several podcasts, several YouTube channels that show you the ropes if you just have the diligence to look at the information. I have a YouTube channel that's 5 years old now. I've been sharing my pathway, my journey, everything that I've done on my YouTube channel to get me to the space where I've been able to pay off over now $463,000 of debt. It's probably more than that now because I done stopped counting. I done stopped counting at this point. But well over $463,000 of debt that I've been able to pay off by a simple strategy. A simple strategy that may require some sacrifice on your part, but most importantly, the first thing that it requires is you being willing to look at your stuff. Because many times we don't want to look at the amount that we owe. We don't want to go in and look at the student loan balances that we've had. One of the things that I've been sharing with you guys, I've been going live periodically, consecutively, especially during this time where the public service loan forgiveness limited waiver was announced, and then the one-time debt relief was announced, and there was so many questions going on, and many folks just didn't know what kind of student loans they had. And so my thing is, what's the hesitation or what's the reservation of looking at the number? I know it's daunting. I know it's challenging. But the only way that you're really going to be able to get out of the hole that you're in is if you're willing to face the hole that you are in. And so one of the spaces and one of the things that I do is try to inspire and share that seed of hope with folks to let them know that there is a way out. But you have to do your part. Everything is not going to be handed to us on hand and foot. Everything is not going to end up being a scapegoat, even though the scapegoat could end up being a blessing. But you have to be willing to do your part as well. So once I started to listen to stories, I always vouch for this particular podcast what they had, it was just on their website at first, like when I found them, but now they're on YouTube, they on Apple Podcasts, they all over the place. But His and Her Money, if you guys have not heard of His and Her Money, they literally, I mean, when I found them, it was like the saving grace. It was a saving grace for me, because by me listening to the stories on His and Her Money, because essentially they interview people who are on their debt elimination journey, people who have insurmountable amount of student loan debt, people who have mortgages, people who have way more debt than I was in at the time, and just hearing how they did it. And hearing how they did it gave me the inspiration and the belief that I could do it too. So sometimes all it takes is for you to hear a story. But the question is, are you willing to sit down to hear the story? Are you willing to sit down to take notes? Are you willing to sit down to see, let me glean insight from somebody else's efforts? Because we all know the popular phrase that success leaves clues. And the only way that you can find the clues is if you are willing to sit and listen to the gems that are being dropped. Because 9 times out of 10, they are. There are probably several gems that I'm dropping right now that many of you might not pick up. But if you are a DDTV gemmer, then more than likely, I'm pretty sure that you're picking up the gems. So listening to their stories not only gave me inspiration, it also gave me ideas of what I could try. And I can be honest and transparent with you all. I'm an accountant by trade. I've always been a numbers person. I've always been interested and fascinated by how numbers work and how analytics work and reporting and just writing things out and doing things by the book. I was always intrigued by it. Math was my thing. Numbers was my thing. But I never thought to apply the things that I learned in college or in graduate school, because I have an undergraduate in accounting and I have an MBA in financial management. So I studied stocks and charts and analytics and everything in school. And I never thought to take that same approach and apply it to my personal finances. So by the time I get into the workforce, I'm accelerating through my career relatively fast. I'm managing different things and just dealing with numbers galore in the millions and in the billions, analyzing those numbers, making sense of the data, making sure that it's being reported correctly, not realizing that my personal finances were a wreck until I got exposed when I did that exercise in 2015. So listening to the stories by folks on different podcasts that are being interviewed and just gaining the insight, I'm like, oh, I can do this. I can do this. And sometimes it's just as simple as mapping out your numbers. So for me, I was never formally taught how to budget, even though technically I learned how to create plans and forecasts from a business perspective when I was in college and in the workforce, but not realizing at home I was never taught how to budget. My example of seeing budgeting occur was my mom having a stack of envelopes. She would write on the back of the envelope the amount that was due and the date that it was due. And she would wrap them in rubber bands, and she was separated by month. She was separated by 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So she had all of these different piles, and the different piles would coincide with when she could send the envelope in, because she didn't have enough money in the bank to cover all of the bills. So she would rotate them. So when I got older, I didn't have a 30 and 60 day, 90 day pile, because my concern was I just wanted to make sure that I paid whatever I needed to pay on time. So even if that meant I had 38 cents in my account left, I was fine as long as all my bills were paid on time. But what I did do was copy that same model of taking the envelopes, writing the amount on the back, and then going from there. I never planned ahead of time. I always just paid when the bill came, in correlation to when I received my paycheck. Amen. When I received my paycheck. So somebody asked, what was the podcast? It's His and Her Money. So His and Her Money, they are on Apple, they are on YouTube. You can find them anywhere. They're doing really good. You can even find them on Instagram, social media. They're doing really, really good. But they focus and have an emphasis like on marriage and money, but you can glean insight from anything, because if a couple has issues in their finances, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have those same challenges in yours, even if you're not married. So it's not about it. It's just basically looking at the insight that you're able to gain from that. But I'm going to answer the rest of the questions, but I just want to kind of tell my story real quick so that way I can make sense of everything that I'm sharing with you guys, so we can make the connection and to get to the questions. But gleaning the insight and learning different strategies and ways that I could approach my finances, it was a powerful experience. And all that it took was for me to write out how much I made, write out all of my bills, write out when all of my bills were due, and scheduled accordingly. That was it. Many of you, and what some folks may have challenges with, is if their income is not enough to cover the expenses that they have. And if that becomes the situation for you, the only way that you're going to know is by outlining it, so that way you can fully see it. And then that way you can see what is the deficit that you now need to supplement. So because I had these goals, and because I had this desire to like eradicate my debt and eliminate my debt and just get rid of it, I just wanted it gone, I was extremely aggressive. I was too aggressive, if I may say so myself, but that was because I was managing 2 households. So not only did I have to pay my own bills, I had to pay my mom's, and I had to make sure that she was good. And then they had situations where her Social Security got cut off completely, and I had to supplement and basically cover everything overnight, which was a huge challenge. But what helped me and what saved me was seeing the numbers on paper, so that I could know what I now needed to supplement. So if I had a $1,700 difference, I had to now work backwards to see how can I get to that $1,700 outside of my job. And this is on a monthly basis. So by you looking at the numbers could help you think out of the box to get to the solution that you need. So even if your amounts may seem huge, it may seem like there's no way out, everything is workable. It's about breaking it down. So what helped me also mentally, and I'll share this before we get into the questions, what helped me mentally was separating that large number. So when you look at everything in the aggregate and you tally up all of your debts, your number may be 165, it may be 250, it may be 370, it may be 465, it may be 500,000, I don't know. But if you take that number and you break it down to identify what makes up those debts, and then order them from smallest to largest, that way you can only focus on the one that you need to be tackling, and it'll make the rest manageable. Because if you begin to continue to just look at the overall number, it's going to more than likely impact you emotionally, where you're not going to feel like you can cross a finish line. And so you may feel like, well, why am I even trying this? Why even go this extra mile? Why even doing this? Because the number isn't going down. But if you split it up and just focus on one debt at a time, it'll make all the difference in the world. So when I split out all of my debts, and I realized that I had like 11 different debt accounts, and this was even prior to me breaking out all of the debts that I had within my student loans. And this is another one for you all. If you have student loans, you want to make sure that you're looking at your individual disbursements, because your student loan balance can essentially comprise 10, it could be 10, 12, it could be 13 different individual loans. So you want to look at your overall balance and see how many is there. Is it 5? Is it 6? Is it 7? Is it 8? Is it 10? Is it 2? Or is it 1? If you consolidate it, if it's 1. That's going to help you with breaking down your approach to paying and what order you pay in. That's another conversation for another day. But if you just look at how much debt you're in, look at your income that's coming in, do the math so that you can figure out what you would need to supplement or what it's going to take for you to get to the goal that you need, then you will be surprised at what ideas, what opportunities, what new things come up for you that will end up converting into cash. Because to be honest with you guys, I was extremely shocked that I was able to pay off $27,000 in like 7.5 months. Like when that happened for me, I was like, how in the world did I do this? In my first time starting my debt freedom journey, within 7.5 months, $27,000 of debt was gone. Within 7.5 months. I couldn't believe it. By the ending of my first year, I had paid off about $47,000. Then the next year, I was at 90-something thousand. Then the third year, I was at 151. And so the number just kept going up just by simply following the strategy. And granted, good things will happen. You may get some relief. You may get some unexpected windfall of money. But the key is recognizing that you're doing your part to reduce whatever debts that you have under your name. So I just wanted to encourage you guys to let you know that it is possible. And no matter what happens, because we don't know what's going to happen with this debt relief, just know that there are options and there are ways that you could take different approaches so that whatever approach you take is going to get you closer to whatever your end goal is or whatever your end desire is. All right, everybody. So let me go through some of the questions. When is the best time to pay credit cards to see scores improve, like the 2 payments a month? This is a great question. So I'm going to answer this. One of the strategies, and again, when it comes to credit, everything is about timing. And what I want you guys to understand is that you could have a credit score in 1 month and it could go down in the next month and it can go up in the next month. So just understanding that your credit score is resettable. And when I say it's resettable, it means you can make one move, one strategic move, either paying something down or either getting something cleared off of your credit report, depending on what it is, that can help your score go up. The best time to pay your credit cards is to make sure that you pay them on time. So you want to pay them in accordance to when it is due, but then you also want to look at the timing of what your existing balances will be at the time the statement closes. Because what you have to remember is that your statement date and your payment date are typically going to be 2 different dates, of course, because they want to give you some time to be able to make your payment before they close it out, meaning before the statement closes for the month or for the period, whatever your closing statement date is. If you make a payment on your credit card for, let's say at the time that your payment is due, your payment due is $50, right? But your statement balance on that particular account at the time that you pay is $1,200. So if on the payment date you pay $1,200, but then you end up charging something else on the card right before the statement closes, which was typically like within 2 or 3 days, and it ends up being an additional $1,200 or $1,500 charge that you make, but your credit limit on that card is only $3,000. If that balance gets reported out at $1,500, then you have to realize that you are now reporting at a utilization that is 50% of your limit. And that is not good. That is not good. You want to be able to keep your limit, your utilization anywhere. And I know the standard norm is 30%, but that's not going to do any benefit for your score. If you want to see a change in your score, you want to have your utilization be 10% or less. And ideally, 10% or less is what I'm just going to say for the sake of this conversation. 10% or less. If your utilization is more than that, you're going to see the fluctuations in your score, meaning your score is going to go down. So what you want to do is find a way to map out all of the credit cards that you have. You want to identify the credit limit for each. You want to identify when the statement closes. You also want to identify when the payments are due. And then you want to make sure that you're timing it appropriately so that whatever your reported balance is going to be on the statement closing date, that is less than 10% of whatever your credit limit is. So that's just a gem that I will share with you. So it's not like a one size fit all. It's going to be based on the credit card that you have, the type of card that you have, when the statement closes out, and so forth. Have you always made six figures? No, I have not. I have not always made six figures. But even still, prior to reaching that point, I still had a lot of debt. And I had a lot that I had to manage, which is why I relied so much on the debt as well. So even back then, and I can tell you guys this, it's not about the amount of money you make, it's about what you do with the money that you make. Because to be honest with you guys, I literally live off of 28% of my income. So I stretch myself in a way where I'm not using or relying on all of my income, which is what I think happens with a lot of people, because when you begin to make more, you end up wanting to spend more. And I have to credit one of my retreat brothers for pushing me and challenging me to max out my retirement in like a 4-month time span. And him challenging me to do that, I had to go home. I had to look at the numbers. I had to figure out, okay, well, how much is it going to be? How much will I have to contribute in order to make this happen? It was a lot. It was a lot. I was like, oh, Lord, how am I going to survive? How am I going to survive? I'm not going to be able to survive. But I said, let me go ahead and try it. And I said, if worse comes to worse, I could always switch it back. But what really gave me the biggest epiphany was me being able to reach the goal amount, meaning because I now had to contribute majority of my income in order to meet this maxing out of my retirement for the year, I became accustomed to living off of whatever was coming into my bank account, which was not a lot, to be honest with you. So once the goal was met and the ending of the year came and I was able to max out my retirement, at first I got excited. I was like, woo, I did it. And then I was like, woo, let me go ahead and switch this back. And then something paused in me and said, if you were able to do this, why would you go back? If you were able to do this in 4 months and manage it for 4 months, why would you go back? And I was like, that was like a light bulb for me. Because for me, what stretches me the most is me asking myself questions. So I'm a question type person. So questions for me allow me to make better decisions, honestly. And so the minute when I was getting ready to switch it back, that question popped in my head, like, why would you? And I said, you doggone right. Why would I? Why would I? And so I kept it the same, but I use it in a different strategic way where I could say, I'm still going to focus on maxing out each year, but then I'm still going to focus on seeing how I can use whatever the difference is to help accelerate my debt reduction, So it's essentially looking at what your expenses are, how you can minimize them as much as possible. Sometimes you just have to get creative. I have a whole playlist on my channel, on my YouTube channel, the Debt Demolisher TV, that talks about the 11 steps in detail that I took to pay off the amount of debt that I paid off. The amount of strategy, the phone calls that I had to make, the negotiations, like all of that. It takes effort. I just want you guys to know that it takes effort. This is not something that's just going to be easy peasy. You're going to have to make some decisions, and you're going to have to be willing to sacrifice just a little bit for a little while. I didn't qualify for public service, but the Biden thing growing through. So as I was saying a little bit earlier when I started the session, is that the court order is still in effect. So it's still blocked at this point, but the Department of Education is still working through all who have submitted applications thus far to let people know what their outcome would be, whether or not if they were approved or if they are not approved for it. They cannot issue any funds. They cannot release any of the relief money until this block has been lifted. And that's the piece that we don't know because it's still being managed inside of the whole court thing. So next question I see is, I was approved for the Biden loan. How long does it take before it's removed from your credit report? So again, this is going to be contingent upon when the litigation is resolved. Right now, it's not resolved, so there's not much that you can do in this case. But what you can do is whenever they process it, if you got a letter from them, whenever they get that green light, it's going to be going out like hotcakes. It's going to be going out like hotcakes. And when I say going out like hotcakes, meaning being applied to your debts, meaning your student loans. So practically probably given to your loan servicer, whoever your loan servicer is. But they're going to apply it. But the minute that it gets applied, a minute that the payment gets applied and it gets reported out on your credit report, you're going to be able to see the change. You will be able to see the change. Because your credit report, it still has to be reported out. So whenever it gets applied, you're going to know. I have 2 Parent Plus loans since 2016. I can't pay them. I know. So if that's the case for you, it's really gonna take some and it's tricky. It's really, really tricky with this one because Parent Plus, if I'm not mistaken, the IDR plans for Parent Plus is only an income contingent driven repayment plan. And I don't believe their payment plans qualify for IDR, but I could be wrong. It may end up dropping off after 20 or 25 years. But I can look into that. It's going to be a challenge, honestly, for Parent Plus. So prayerfully, some of the relief, if it gets approved, once it gets approved, can help with getting some of that down. But depending on how much it is, depending on how large the loans are, it's going to be a challenge. And unless you know for sure that it can be dismissed or it'll be forgiven after 25 years under the IDR forgiveness, and if you want to wait it out, because at this point it's 2016, we are going into 2023 now. So even still, that's still another 13, 14 years before you would even reach 20 years. So it's kind of sticky. 10% of your limit. Yes, 10% of your credit limit. So whatever your credit limit is on your car, on your credit card. Oh, wait, what's the YouTube? The Debt Demolisher TV is my YouTube channel. There's a link in my profile here it's several links in there, but if you click on the Debt Demolisher TV, like on YouTube or something like that, subscribe or something like that, it'll take you there, take you right to it. You are so inspiring. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. What about public loans for public loan? What about public loan forgiveness? So yeah, there's no stipulations or anything with public service loan forgiveness. If you have applied and you got everything that you needed to get in by the limited waiver expiration date, which was October 31st, you just kind of have to wait until they process it and get all of the counts updated. But the best thing to do would just be to monitor your dashboard either under FSAID or under Mohila, if you have a Mohila account. Is it best to apply for credit cards to use to pay off issues that negatively affect my credit score to build it up? So this is a great strategy, and I'm going to share this with you all because one of the things that I did to help with my debt reduction strategy, that this this may not really be like a huge benefit for credit purposes because it messes with your utilization. But one of the things that I did was that I definitely took advantage of promotional opportunities. So oftentimes credit cards will give you 0% interest. They'll give you either 0% balance transfer, or they'll give you 0% like direct deposit, where they literally will put the money in your account and you can use it however you want to use it. But you'll have either 12 months, 18 months, 24 months to pay it off at 0%. And they will charge you like a fee. It's like sometimes it may be a 3% fee, 2% fee, 4% fee. Just depends on the bank. But that was one of the things that I did in rotation to help me pay off my debts faster because it was 0% interest. So if I had a loan that was like my car loan was ridiculous. I think my car loan was like 23 or 28. I think it was like 28.99 interest. My car loan was crazy back then. I don't even know why I said yes to those terms. But again, back then I was like, can I afford the $300 and something a month? Yeah, I can do it. So let's go. And I needed a car, so let's go. But when I think about like those instances, if I had a loan that was really, really high in interest rates, I would take out the type that would give me the cash. So I would do the cash to pull out, make the principal only payment on whatever loan that was, and then that would give me 18 months to pay off the credit card. The thing is, you gotta have a decent amount of credit limit. So I was strategic with mine because majority of my credit limits are relatively high. So even if I took out enough to put me at 50% utilization, meaning 50% of whatever my credit limit is, to borrow those funds, I would pay that over 18 months, making sure that I wasn't accruing any interest during that point. And then the other loan that I had would now be reduced by the $12,000 or the $13,000 or whatever the amount was that I borrowed to kind of move the money to reduce it. So that was a great strategy. But in your case, if you are trying to improve your credit score, then you have to realize that if you use a credit card to pay off something else, it's going to increase your utilization. And if something has a negative impact, it's not necessarily going to increase your score per se just because you have satisfied it. For medical purposes, Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, they did state that if you have like medical payments that were in collections and you end up paying them off, if you pay them off, then they're going to remove the negative item from your report. They also indicated that before they put medical collections on your report, that it will have to be outstanding for a year. So that gives you up to a year to make payments or get into arrangements with whoever your medical providers are in order to prevent it from getting on your credit report. Because once you get a collection item, once you get any of those items, your score is really going to take a hit. So that will be one thing that I can share. Another thing that you can do to help boost up your credit is by leveraging secured credit cards. And then there's also an option called Chime. So I don't often, and I'm not vouching for any of this stuff, but you want to do your own due diligence. You want to look into it for yourself and find out how their processes will help with credit improvement. But essentially, it is something that will you take out a loan, but it's not really a loan. You just putting your money down and you pay back on it like once a month, and then those things will show up it'll show up pretty much like an installment loan, and that'll help with creating versatility in your credit portfolio or your credit profile. So one of the things, if you want to look at improving your credit score, you want to make sure that you have a diversified mix. You want to make sure that your utilizations are low. You also want to make sure that you have a pretty lengthy history. So I would say a good length of history is anything from 8 to 10 years or more. You also want to make sure that you're keeping your inquiries to a limit, no more than one a year. No more than one a year. The student loans and hospital bills are what's on my credit. Yeah, so the hospital bills, it may work in your favor to pay them off because we know from what they said, they're going to remove any collections on medical bills once it's been satisfied. So if that's the case for you, then I would consider that. The student loan piece, if that's in default or that's in collections, more than likely then that means your student loans are in default. And I don't know what kind of student loans you have, if they're private or if they're federal. It can be challenging to get student loan, it can be challenging to get student loan, like negative remarks from student loans off your credit report without doing some form of credit repair. So I don't do credit repair in the least bit. If you are looking for someone who does that kind of thing, you're going to have to do your due diligence. You can even do it yourself. There are several trusted folks who teach on how to DIY your credit repair. I don't know if you guys have heard, if you all have heard of Shonda Martin, but Shonda Martin, she literally teaches people how to clean up their own credit. And she has tools, she has templates, she even teaches on live as well. I haven't seen her go live on YouTube in a little while, but she definitely will pour out and give you answers to any questions that you have. But she doesn't do the credit repair, but she's educating you so that you can know what to do. And she gives you the tools so that you can know what to do. So if that's something that you want to try, she will probably be the only person that I would suggest or recommend, just because of the validity behind what, the value that she's been giving to so many people. And, she's just transparent and she teaches very well. So if you're looking to do cleanups and all of that, Shonda Martin will be your girl. She will be your girl to get all the tools and get all the process and the roadmaps to get all of the negative items cleared up. My thing is strategy and how to position yourself to get the maximum points in all of the 5 areas. So that's really where my expertise lies in. But because I don't do credit repair at all. I'm credit education, credit strategy. Will the interest rate be reduced? Because that's crazy too. So here's what they said about the interest rates. And this is going back to the student loans. So because we all know that those who have federal loans, that their interest rate right now is at 0, as well as their required minimum payment is 0 if you're under the repayment pause. They said once everything goes back into effect, the interest rates, especially if you've consolidated, they're going to do an average of the interest rates from, all of your prior interest rates, and they're going to do an average and some type of calculation. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there's a formula that they're going to use to figure out what the new interest rate is going to be, especially for those who have consolidated their loans. But that's a great question about knowing if the interest rates are going to be reduced, because to be honest with you all, it may be still based on what you signed up for during that promissory note. So remember, each time you took out a loan, you had to agree to the terms, you had to agree to the amount, and you had to agree to the interest rate. So if the interest rates are fixed, then more than likely it's going to go back to that. The only time that they would have to recompute or redetermine interest rates is if you consolidated during this repayment pause, because everything was set to 0. So I don't know if they're going to take some initiative, especially if this one-time debt relief is not able to go through. I don't know if they're going to take some initiative to try to help with offsetting some of the interest to help people out, because some of the interest rates that have been assessed are ridiculous, and that interest rates, they're accruing, they're being capitalized, and it's a lot. It could definitely be a lot. So that piece, I don't know. The only thing that I can do is hope that they may end up doing something, but to be honest with you, if that's what was signed when you took out the loan, then more than likely it's going to stay that way unless you refinance. Unless you refinance or consolidate or whatever. So I have a low credit score and I want to build it up. So if you have a low credit score and you want to build it up, you first want to make sure that you're looking at what you currently have inside of your credit portfolio. Do you have revolving debt? Do you have installment debt? What are the ratios and what are the utilizations for each of the loan types that you have? You want to look at how often do you submit an inquiry? Like how often do you have your credit pulled on a hard basis? You want to look at all of these things. So how long have you even had credit? So another thing that's going to happen for those who may end up receiving the public service loan forgiveness, or for those who may end up receiving the one-time debt relief that will end up paying off their loans in full, you have to realize that once that loan is paid off, it's now closed. And once it closes, you're going to lose the age that's associated with that particular loan type. So if your credit is important to you, I highly want to encourage you to grab a hold of your credit report. Because of the pandemic, you can get your credit report for free every single week. You can request it every single week from all three credit bureaus at no cost. Your job is to look at your credit report in detail, and your job is to identify what your oldest debt is, meaning what's the oldest account that you have that has an open date. So if the last open date was 2006, or the oldest open date is from 2006, and that oldest open date from 2006 is a loan, the minute that you pay that loan off, you're going to lose all 20-something years of, or not really 20-something, close to 20-something, 17 years worth of history. Unless you have something else that is still on your credit report that won't go away, like i.e. revolving debt, that can allow you to maintain that age. Is there a way or time to pay credit cards monthly to improve score? I think I was just sharing that. It's about strategy. You got to look at your credit limits. You got to look at your balances at the time that your statement closes. It's all about timing. So I did answer that already. Federal loans, but I've received email that I was approved. Also, my school was on a list. So that's good. So if your school is on a list, then hopefully and I'm assuming that's for borrower's defense. So if your school is on the list for borrower's defense, then more than likely, once the settlement and all of that stuff happens, then depending on when your loans were taken out or what the terms are of how the borrower's defense is going to work, because typically borrower's defense, they will typically give you a range. So like if you went to school, if you took out loans during this period, then those loans will be discharged. So it depends on what the findings are and what the outcome will be. But if the loans that you have taken out that are in default are on the list for borrower's defense, then that'll end up being resolved. And once that gets resolved, I would see what I can do to challenge getting those negative remarks removed once it's been, satisfied and taken off, because it's probably still going to show up as a collection item, even though it'll be paid and satisfied from the discharge. But I would definitely challenge it. I was approved for both PSLF and the one-time debt relief. I understand the Biden administration loan is blocked. That is true. So right now it is blocked. So they cannot do anything related to releasing any funds or relief related to the one-time debt relief. But if you got approved for public service loan forgiveness, that is awesome. Can I celebrate you? Yes, you're going to have to wait on that letter from the Department of Education letting you know that your loan has been discharged. So if you've been approved, does that mean that it shows your 120, you've met the 120 qualified payments? My next question to you would be, were all of your loans, because I'm pretty sure you have multiple loans. If you just have one, then that's good. But if you had multiple loans that are direct loans, more than likely, if they weren't taken out like around the same time, they may have different they may have different PSLF approval dates. So it could be a year apart, it could be 2 years apart, it could be 3 years apart. I'm not sure. It just depends on how many you have, how many you had. What does all of that mean? Could you help with the terminology? Okay, so I can tell you exactly where you can go. I have a YouTube video that explains everything you need to know about credit, what you need to look for. I break down the examples and show you the questions that you might want to ask yourself, and just literally just taking your statements. Pull out your credit card statement right now. Look until you find the statement date. Look until you find the credit limit. Look until you find the balance. Look until you find the payment due date. You're going to extract those information or extract those details from each of your credit card statements so that you can do the math and you can decide, or you can calculate taking your balance and dividing your balance by your credit limit. So if your balance as of the statement date is $5,000, but your credit limit on that credit card is $10,000, if you take and divide those two, that's going to be 50%. So that means you are at 50%. You are using 50% of your available credit. And what the lenders look at when they see that ratio is that you're risky. Why? Because they're saying on average, a person should not be using, and I'm going to use this in air quotations, they should not be using any more than 30% of their available credit. So if you are using more than 30% of your available credit, then that means it may be some signs that you can't manage what you have access to. Even though I know that that can be very misleading, because there are many people who pay their balances off in full. So it may not be the case that you can't afford to pay down that $5,000, because many people do it. But people don't understand that when it comes to your credit, it's about timing. So whatever number gets reported, you want to keep that number as low as possible if you want to be able to get the maximum points inside of your credit score for that bucket. So utilization, which is the amount of credit that you're using in comparison to the amount of credit that you have, that accounts for 30% of your score. So if that accounts for 30% of your score, and you know the score ranges from 300 to 850, then that means the maximum amount of points that you can get within a window is 550. And if you take 550 and multiply that by 30%, that's the maximum amount of points that you can get for the utilization area. The utilization, and I'm calling it utilization because that's what it is, but essentially it's just the amount of credit that you're using in comparison to what was given to you or what is made available to you. So you want to keep that as low as possible, because the banks, the lenders, they don't know you. And because they don't know you, they have to use numbers. They have to use values. They have to use a report to make a determination of your financial character. This is one of the things that I teach inside of my Credit Improvement Strategies workshop. I host a live workshop every quarter that not only teaches you about credit education, but also helps you do the analysis on your own credit report so that you can convert that information that's in your credit report to make sense of it, of how you can create your credit improvement strategy plan. So essentially, when we go through this class, this workshop that I host, I give you the template. I give you everything where you just have to plug and drop in your numbers, and it's going to do the math for you so that way you can make sense of the numbers. Because I know everybody may not be, they may not be into let me calculate this. So I give you the template, and all you have to do is take the number from your report and plug it in and let the template do the rest. So that way we can go over what steps you would need to take in order to get your score to where you want it to be. Oftentimes people don't even need credit repair. They just need to understand the algorithm. I have a credit ebook that talks about the 5 keys or the 5 rules to perfect credit. That in and of itself, if you follow that, that can get your credit score up to par. I have the live workshop that I do, and I do one-on-ones, but my one-on-ones are very limited, to be honest with you. They're very limited. So I don't have a lot of space and opportunity for one-on-ones, but I do them. But mainly it's the credit ebook if you want to kind of self-pace and do it yourself. A live workshop if you want to be able to learn and see and gain insight from everybody in the room that's participating in the workshop. Or if you just want to do one-on-one, that's an option too. But space is limited. It's limited. Okay. Okay. Where can we get more information? Because I didn't understand. Do you do consultations? Oh, yes. So, yes, I was just saying that I do that. You can go to my website. Again, there's a link in my profile that will take you to my website. It will also take you to the YouTube page I have several credit lessons on YouTube. What I may end up doing is including one of the videos and the link that I have on my page. I'm not going to be able to do it right now because I have something else that I have to do after we finish up this live stream. But give me like a couple of days and I can update the link inside of the link that's on my TikTok page here. That could take you to the video that breaks down the credit piece. So I can share that with you guys if you want to be able to take a look at it. And then it also has a link to my website too, if you want to request a consultation. All right. Thank you all so much for the follows. Thank you all so much for the follows. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for sharing it out if you did. Thanks for the likes and all that good stuff. I appreciate it. So it looks like we are winding down. I don't see any other questions. Thank you all for your time and your attention on tonight. I hope that this conversation inspired you and gave you a little bit of hope despite all of the madness and the upsets and everything else that's going on in the season. I just want you to know that there is a way out, even if it seems unbearable. You just have to position yourself to get not only the insight, to get the wisdom, to get the inspiration, to get the momentum that you need in order to get out of whatever space that you no longer want to be in. Because I have to tell you all, I started my debt elimination journey and I have not looked back. And not to say that it was easy, not to say that there weren't any downturns, or not to say that there weren't points where I wanted to give up, not to say that there weren't points where I was upset at myself for maybe even a financial decision that I made. It's a journey, and it's about moving through the journey, and it's also about learning through the journey. So I just want to encourage you. If you have over $400 and something thousand of debt, you can get out. You can get out. And if you need evidence of that, you need to find a story, find a podcast, find a YouTube channel. You can make the Debt Demolisher TV the YouTube channel of your choice if you would like. But you want to find the inspiration that can give you that encouragement that there is light at the end of the tunnel, so that you can be able to take action. So with that, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and close out for the night. I thank you all for being with me. I have, something else I have to get into in about 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and close out. I see yes, ma'am. Okay. All right. So join me back again. We will do our next live stream on Sunday. I'm going to, because there's not many updates that are happening right now, I still want to be able to answer any questions that you have, give any insight that I can share that can help you during your student loan navigation process. And of course, as more details come up, I'm going to be the first to let you guys know. I saw several questions on TikTok as well, so I want to make sure that I have a chance to go through it and respond to some of the folks. I get a lot of comments, so apologies if it takes me some time to kind of get back to you. But if there's some really good questions that I find inside of the comments, then of course, when we go live again, I'll be sure to address it. So that'll be Sunday. And then if any breaking news happens, I'm going to go live to talk about it on whatever date that is. But the next live will be scheduled for Sunday. So you guys have a strong closing of the month. Welcome to the last month of the year. We are now in December. And I'm hoping that you're going to use this time to prepare for a great new year. for a great new year. So I want to remind you that your financial prosperity awaits you, and so does your financial sanity. You already know what I'm going to tell you to do, and that's what? Get to work. All right, guys. Bye.